Hello, Grace Christian School. My name is Mr. Rodney Raimonde. I apologize that we cannot do this in person out at Umstead Park, but due to the current situations, we're going to try to do the best we can. So I decided to put a little recording together for you. What we're going to be discussing the Lewis and Clark expedition. I am going to be talking about the hunting, the food gathering, and the trapping during the expedition, and what it took for the expedition to make it successful. So today we're going to be discussing the Lewis and Clark expedition. Does anyone know why they decided to do the expedition? So they did the expedition to make diplomatic contact with the Indians, to expand the fur trade, and to find the hypothetical northwest water passage to the Pacific Ocean. So what years did this expedition happen? Okay, the expedition took place 1804 to 1806. One of the folks that the Lewis and Clark took with them was a Native American Indian. And what was her name? Her name was Sacagawea. Does anyone know why they wanted to take a Native American with them on the expedition? Okay, my question to you before answering that question is, why do you guys go to school? Why do your parents send you to a school with the teachers? Because when you're learning, the person you want to learn from or the people you want to learn from are the experts. So your math teacher is the expert in math. Your English teacher is the expert in English. They can teach it and communicate it a little bit better than some of the people you already know. So that's why they wanted a Native American or an Indian to go with them, so that they could learn the ways of the Indian. They could have the benefit of their knowledge, and also the Indian could talk to other Indians a little bit easier than the white man could talk to the Indians. On the expedition, Lewis and Clark expedition actually identified 122 new varieties of animals that they did not know existed, and 206 varieties of plants, some which were edible, some which were not. Again, this helped to sustain them throughout their journey to the West Coast. Other than just exploring, it was also a learning activity for the Lewis and Clark expedition. They had to learn about the different animals in different parts of the country. There are a wide variety of climates in the United States and in that vast wilderness, so therefore they held wide variety and vast differences in animals. So to learn about the animals, they had to talk to the Indians in that general region to find out what was in the area, what was game that could be hunted, what was game that could not be hunted, what could be trapped, what were good to eat, what were not so good to eat. They also had to learn about the plants in the area to see what plants could sustain them. So to give you an idea, does anyone have an idea of how much food it took the expedition to procure on the way? How many animals did they need to eat per day, and how many total animals that they took throughout their journey? Okay, they had secured so many animals that I can't remember them all, so I have to read you the list. All right, each man had to consume about 9 pounds of meat per day. 9 pounds is a lot of meat. A lot of animals that need to be taken. Be a whole lot more than the Big Macs or the Arby's burger or the Chick-fil-A chicken sandwiches that you get to eat for lunch. Each man had to eat at least twice a day. They were expending a lot of energy by doing this trek across the country, so they needed a wide variety and large numbers of animals. So, to read you this list, throughout their expedition, they kept a journal of how many animals and what species they took. They took 1,001 deer. That is both mule deer and whitetail. They took 375 elk, 227 bison, 62 antelope, 35 bighorn sheep, 43 grizzly bear, 23 black bear, 113 beavers, which were either shot or trapped, 16 otter, 104 geese and brant. Brant are a species of duck and geese. 46 species of grouse, 9 turkeys, 48 plovers. They took 18 wolves, but they only ate one. 12 horses, and unfortunately, just the ways that it was back then, 190 dogs. Okay, the expedition had to go 20 miles per day. And let me go back to my notes. Okay. They traveled nearly 8,000 miles and covered 10 to 12 miles per day. How many of you think you could walk 20 miles a day? I sure couldn't. But that's why they required so much meat and so much game animals. And they didn't even get into keeping a good diary of the plants that they were able to eat. They did keep a diary of the plants that they discovered on the way, but they never really wrote down a whole lot about what plants that they were able to consume. They just tried whatever they could. If it was bitter, they didn't eat it. If it kind of tasted pretty good, they went ahead and ate it. But also, the Native Americans also showed them some of the plants, some of the tree that they could make stews or soups out of, or even a tea out of. Okay, some of the animals that they encountered. This right here is a white-tailed deer. Very common around this part of the country. Some of the western states do have this type of animal. White-tailed deer can be told from a distance from a mule deer by the way its horns are. A white-tailed deer always has one main beam, and it has tines that come off of that main beam. All different types and sizes of them. Different ages give you different size horns, different health gives you different size horns. But the thing that they do have in common is, again, the main beam with tines coming off of the main beam. A mule deer, which lives out west, usually from a little west of the Missouri River, well, a little west of the Mississippi River to the west coast, has a little different set of horns. A mule deer can usually be seen from a distance that everything forks. So this one is a little bit closer to the whitetail, but there are forks. Mule deer horns do not have a main beam, so to speak. They have a beam that comes up and always forks. Could be 2, 4, could be another, but everything would be another fork off of this. They're a little bit larger in body size. They're a little bit grayer in color, and they do not have the distinctive white tail that the eastern species white-tailed deer have. Also out west in the plains, other than the bison and buffalo, they have the pronghorn antelope. This is a pronghorn antelope. It is actually a member of the goat family. A pronghorn antelope can actually reach speeds of 60 miles an hour. So 60 miles an hour is pretty fast speed, and trying to hit one with your old style flintlock or percussion cap muzzleloader was a difficult feat. But again, they were able to secure some. The Native Americans out there showed them how to hunt these variety of animals, because you all hunt them in a different fashion. They also had a lot of elk, and a little bit later I'll show a clip of an elk that I do have mounted, but it's a little bit big to be sticking out on the fence. So some of the other things was an animal, was bears. Okay. Does anybody have an idea what this is? This is actually a black bear skull. And this is a relatively small black bear. This one's only about 250, maybe 275 pounds. And the black bears throughout the country can get to about 500 pounds. They also hunted grizzly bear. Grizzly bear, if I had a skull of a grizzly bear, it would be about that long. Grizzly bears start out at about 500 pounds and can go up in excess of 1,200 pounds. They also had fox and wolves and coyotes and bobcats and mountain lions. This is a red fox. They're very, very soft, very, very pretty furs. A lot of people like to put them here. It actually retains some heat. Very, very comfortable to wear. This is a coyote. Now this one's an eastern coyote, so he's a little bit larger than western coyotes. Hair on this is a little bit more coarse. Not quite as soft, but still they were able to use the pelt for a lot of different things. Deer hides. Why do you think they would try to keep the furs of the animals? Okay. With the horns of the deer. Why would they keep the horns of the deer? So the horns of the deer could be bartered and traded with the Indians. They could make buttons out of them. They could make knife handles out of them. Could make ornamental things out of them for trade to other white settlers that might be coming, or to other Indian tribes. The hides, they could trade to the Indians. The Indians could put them together and use them as blankets. They could use them as clothing. You could tan them with the hair on, which gives you a good insulation factor. Or you could take the hair off and actually make things like possible bags to carry your musket balls in, to carry your tobacco in, to carry your flint and steel in. You could also make your moccasins, your shirts, your pants, coats, and even hats out of them. Typically, they would have what is termed as a muzzleloader, or a musket type of a firearm. This firearm, they had to carry the powder, and they sometimes carried them in an old steer horn or cow horn. Carried all the projectiles or the bullets in a little pouch. Basically what they had to do, this was a single shot weapon. You would put your powder in this end, then you would put your musket ball, that's a 50 caliber little musket ball. Put that down in there, and you would take your ramrod and ram it home. Then you'd put your powder in for your flintlock, or a percussion cap for the percussion caps, and then you had to cock the gun and then fire it, and you have one shot. As you can see, there are various sizes and shapes of the projectiles for the rifles that they used. This one is a little 36 caliber. That would be good for the smaller game, your fox, your coyotes, things of that nature. Your 50 caliber and better or bigger can be used for your deer size game, your elk size game. Also, you would have things like this. Now obviously I don't want to use something this large on a small animal. This is what they would use for the bison or the grizzly bears. This is a 58, this is actually a 72 caliber. These two are 58 calibers, and they are actually used for a lot of your big game. You can use this from deer size game up. These are between 45 and 52 caliber. And again, depending on the game, you had to match the size shot to the size of the animal that you're going after. Because lead was a commodity that was heavy, that you did not want to carry more than you had to, so you didn't want to waste the lead on animals by being too much lead for the animal that is needed. Okay, so every man on the expedition, granted they had some horses and mules, but every man had to carry his own weight, plus the weight of his equipment. Some of the equipment that they used, other than his clothes, they always carried a large Bowie knife. That was actually for protection and skinning of game. They carried a smaller knife, which was their knife that they used to eat with or doing carving chores around the camps, making teepee fires, making different things that they would need to use. But this was a small one. It was always carried on the body. The other thing that they always carried was an axe or a hatchet. Okay, this, you see all the movies that show it, that they use it for throwing at things. Well, they did that in competition, and these are not very hard to throw. However, these were, if it was used for defense, was the last line of defense. So you never wanted to throw this. You wanted to keep this in your hand. But this was all variety of tool. This was just a tool to be used for a variety of applications, cutting down trees to make things in the camp, make chairs, make benches, to make your fire. But they always carried an axe. These weighed anywhere from 2 to 3 pounds. They also carried their rifles. Some folks carried 2. They would put a string on here and loop it on their shoulder and carry one in their hand. They may carry a pistol, a flintlock pistol or a muzzle-loading pistol. They also had to carry some food, some rations, and their clothes on their back. So it was not an easy trip. They actually had to carry sometimes between 50 and 100 pounds on their backs every day. And again, that was sometimes 20 miles a day. So again, going back to what they had to eat, that's why they had to consume so many calories. I also had mentioned that they had taken 9 turkeys. Okay, this is an eastern turkey. There are a lot of varieties of turkey. There's the Merriam, the Rio Grande, the Osceola. There are several varieties of turkeys. The turkeys, for those of you that do not know, at one point in time, Benjamin Franklin wanted to make the turkey the symbol of America, but the bald eagle actually won out in that contest. Very, very wise, wary bird. His eyesight is phenomenal. His hearing is pretty good, but his sense of smell is not that terrific. But I just wanted to give you an idea that this, at one point in time, was nominated to become the symbol of America. Okay, the other way that the expedition got meat and also furs and things of that nature was to use a variety of traps. Without getting into the social dilemmas of the trap or anything, these are similar to the leg hold traps that were used. These two here, they come in a variety of sizes. The traps that they carried for bear had a jaw spread of about like this, about 2 feet. They weighed about 72 pounds apiece. These are about maybe 2 pounds apiece, and each person on the expedition carried at least a dozen. So you're looking at 24 pounds to be carried. These are shut. This one is actually open. And basically the way it was used, they, again, learning from the Native Americans, learned the travel routes of the animals, where they live, where they travel, going back and forth either to water or to food. So they would actually bury these in the ground just by about an inch or so on the travel route, and then the animal would come by. They might bait the area, so the animal would stop in that area, and that would set them off, and they would catch them by the leg. It was not painful to the point that we think it's painful. It just grabs and grips the animal by the leg and holds it there until the expedition would come back and check the traps for the animals. Now, does anyone know what these are? Okay. These are actually bear claws. And yes, they did come from the same bear that bear skull came from. They used these to actually trade with the Indians. The Indians would make bracelets, necklaces out of them, pendants out of them. They would do a variety of things. They would make war clubs that they would have these sticking out for use against their enemies. Here are some of the arrowheads that I have been lucky to find in different parts of the country. There's different variety of rocks that they made them out, different sizes. Everybody always thought that these sizes here were arrowheads. They were actually spearheads. So anything much larger than this, or this one, or this one, or this one, or even this one, were actually spearheads because it would be too heavy for the arrows to fly correctly. Also, some of these, like this one here, you see is made out of the same type of rock that this is. This is flint. This is the thing that they would try to find. This was what they used on their muzzleloaders, and also every person would carry some flint because you could actually hit it against steel and create sparks to be able to make your fire. So flint was a very important rock to be able to find. It's very prevalent in the East Coast, especially the Northeast. It's very prevalent out west. Some of the other things that the arrowheads were made out of are obsidian, quartz. This is a quartz head that was found around here. Same with this one. Quartz is very prevalent in North Carolina. So that's how you could tell where the Indians were living. Some of these things that are not native, this obsidian, is usually out west, but it is found here in North Carolina as well because of trade between the Indians. Again, going back to the Indians talked with each other, which was why they wanted the Indian guides to help them along the trip. This is a beard from a turkey. If you would look at the big turkey, these beards here, that distinguishes the male turkey from the female. Other than the red, white, and blue head and the fan, the females do not have the beards or the red and blue and white head. Just a little bit of information for you. 3. Well, I hope that I was able to give you a little bit of insight on the trapping and securing of the meat and the trapping and hunting for the Lewis and Clark expedition. I'm very sorry that we could not have met out at Umstead Park this year. Maybe if everything goes good and everything's calmed down next year, that we will be able to meet with the class out at Umstead Park and again give the demonstration out there in person. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them down, text them, or send them to your teacher. She can get a hold of me, and I promise to get back with her as quickly as possible with a response. Again, thank you for having me. Again, my name is Mr. Rodney Raimonde, and you guys enjoy the rest of your school year and enjoy your summer. Well, what we're going to go over now is some of the guns that they used. This is a .50 caliber muzzle loading rifle. It's indicative of what was used back during the Lewis and Clark expedition. This one is a Hawken style, which is a short stock, which made it a little bit lighter. Some of them had stocks all the way out to the end, but either way, this is very close to what they have used in the past. So we're going to go over how you load and fire the muzzle loaders and the steps they had to go through. So the first thing they had to do was take the hammer and put it at half cock. Then they would have to get powder. Now I'm not using the powder horn, but I will use a measuring device. So they would take some type of a pre-measured amount of powder. They would pour it in to their measuring device. That goes down the barrel first. Once you get it down, you tap it to make sure that it is seated over towards where the firing mechanism is. Then they would take a patch, usually made out of cotton. They use pillow ticking, things of that nature. Then they may take a piece of block of wood to start the ball. That's just carved out of any type of a piece of wood that you can find. Some are round. This one just happens to be square. Then they would take the ball, ram it home, make sure that it is seated down, replace the ramrod into the ramrod holder. Then they would either use caps like I have here, or they have a piece of flint and steel, and they put a little bit of powder in the frism. So this is what a muzzleloader going off sounds like, and all the smoke that will come out from this. So for safety reasons, I'm going to put earplugs in, and I've got my safety glasses on. I'm in a wide open field. I've got a target set down at about 100 yards, so there's no chance of the bullet going anywhere except where I want it to go. So this is what a muzzleloader looks like firing.